Hello, I'm Cormac. You're listening to Queerly Beloved, supported by Amazon Music. In this series, I invite DJs and musicians, friends and allies from the LGBTQ+ community to talk about music, queerness, and anything else that shaped their unique story. So welcome to the first episode of Season 2. My guest today is one of the most exciting producers at the moment, I.JORDAN, whose debut album, I Am Jordan, came out earlier this year on Ninja Tune. But Jordan isn't exactly new. They've been putting out great music since 2019, and I'm delighted that they are finally getting their flowers and the attention they deserve. You can find a playlist for all the music mentioned in today's episode and every episode at the link in the episode description. So here's Queerly Beloved, Season 2, Episode 1 with I.JORDAN. Jordan, I start with all of my guests, and I want to ask you for our listener who you are, how you identify, and what it is that you do.
So, hello, my name is Jordan Tech. My artist name is I.JORDAN, and I'm a DJ and producer. Born in Doncaster in Yorkshire, and now I've been a resident of London for the last 10 years. What I do, I go around places and DJ, and I also make music and have a really nice time doing both of those things.
And have a lovely Doncaster accent, which is very nice.
I like yours as well. We've got a good accent game going on in this podcast.
Yeah, and how are your pronouns?
Oh yeah, they them. I identify as non-binary trans masc.
Super. Well, welcome to the podcast. I'm very happy to have you here. I was saying before we started recording, actually, like, I'm a big fan of your music. So I always feel like it's that typical listener artist thing where you kind of feel like you know a little bit of the artist, but you kind of do and you don't. Because I mean, for me, like, sometimes the music I make, I think, I don't know, like it's a weird snapshot of the person in a way, isn't it? Sometimes like, sometimes it says something and sometimes people just project onto it and get like an idea of an artist, and it's not like that at all. But
no, 100%. Yeah. And likewise to you as well, also a big fan. So just happy to be here.
So what's going on in Doncaster music-wise then? Like, what were you growing up listening to, or where did you grow up? Or
I grew up, working class. I grew up around lots and lots of working class sounds, which translate as lots and lots of dance music, basically. I grew up, I mean, my mum was a huge inspiration to me in terms of like getting me into music. She's always been really into music. Like, I grew up listening to Prince, George Michael, and Phil Collins. Those are like my three main early memories as a kid. But then listening to the music that my cousins were listening to on like tapes. I remember listening to like recorded like Doncaster Warehouse Destruction, kind of like hard dance and hard house, and lots of like, and happy hardcore as well. I got really into happy hardcore when I was like 12, 13, because we used to go to a lot of like fairs as well. Obviously a very working class thing to go to the fairs and like go on the waltzes and I'd just go on the waltzes just to listen to the bangers. And
yeah,
I mean, car boots is always a big thing. Like, my mum would buy me like rip-off CDs of trance classics and like Ministry of Sound trance classic, I Ibiza classics.
Brilliant.
Never from the HMV, just like printed off a bit of paper.
Oh yeah,
like whack it in a CD case.
I know those CDs. I probably still have some of those CDs.
Yeah, same. And then when I got a bit older, I started playing guitar when I was about 10. I got really into guitar music. Was really obsessed with like Placebo, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Him. I went to go see lots and lots of different bands, and then I think that's how I got into it properly. So from there, the sort of like Venn diagram of music genres, I was into like both dance music and rock. And Pendulum came about when I was like 15, 16, and then I was like, wow, this is like the intersection of both of those things. And then that's how I got into drum and bass from about that age, and then that's when I started DJing like via drum and bass.
Was it just you and your mum growing up, or?
Yeah. So my mum's a single parent, and I'm an only child from her side. I have two siblings, but like I didn't grow up with them, and I wasn't in touch with them until a year ago. So yeah, mostly just me and my mum.
You mentioned Prince, who I love, and you mentioned George Michael, who I love, and Phil Collins. But actually, Phil Collins, I maybe didn't listen to so much, but he's really had some bangers.
Yeah, the first thing was from what you listened to growing up, and I distinctly remember I had to Google it when I was answering the questions yesterday. Phil Collins merry-go-round album cover because I was like, I'm a visual learner. I'm really bad at knowing track names and artist names, but I could show you, a vinyl that I love from 20 years ago or whatever. So I just distinctly remember the album cover. So I googled that and then found out that it's apparently a live recording that I listened to growing up. And then Another Day from Paradise, I feel like, is just like the biggest banger ever. Like when he's like on the drums, like huge moment.
It's huge, and also In the Air is
massive
track. He's a brilliant songwriter. So I mean, I have to say you're the first person in the series to mention Phil Collins.
I quite enjoy that.
And was it your mum that owned the Phil Collins LP?
Yeah, it was a CD. She used to have a record player. So I remember Eurythmics. We used to listen to the Eurythmics quite a lot, and Simply Red on the record player.
Oh.
And then she had like a Prince. Prince did a tour. She went to go see him in like 91, and she got the VHS. Oh yes, maybe it was a VHS, not a, because it was before CDs existed. So yeah, the VHS of Prince live and the VHS of Phil Collins, or maybe it was a record. I don't remember. It was not a CD because it was before CDs existed.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, those really early choices, because for me, the thing I was connecting to more was, where the music takes you and really the depth of songwriting and stuff. And when I think about you listening to Phil Collins, when you have no kind of, comparison or context for the artist, you get to listen in this very open-minded, free way. And any artist that writes amazing songs and has really good music can take you there, and that's really the beauty of having an open mind and listening to a really good songwriter. Phil Collins is an amazing songwriter. Also in Genesis, he was brilliant.
What I've always been drawn to my entire life as soon as I started to hear music is good melodies. And I think that's something that I'm still 100% guided by in my own art as a DJ and as a producer. Like, melodies are what carry songwriting for me. I never even really listened to lyrics that much. And what I've heard about as well is I'm undiagnosed but neurodivergent in many different ways. And they were saying, I watched a TikTok the other day that was saying that people with ADHD, they don't necessarily listen to the words, but they hear the words in a melody and hear the sound of the words. And that's how I connect with music as well. And how when I make music, I will loop certain sounds or like lyrics to create more of a melody in itself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's like the common thread with like Phil Collins, Another Day in Paradise is like that. Do, 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 do. Like that's just this biggest moment ever. And I feel like that, yeah, all the sort of like common things between all the different tracks I've chosen is that I'm just always drawn to that like melodical hook.
I'm kind of the opposite. I was always listening to lyrics and reading lyrics and things. And then when I went into like the studio with mates to make music, and we would both love, I don't know, Björk, or we would both love Depeche Mode, or we would both love the Eurythmics, for example, who you mentioned. And then I would be like, oh, I love it when they say this, and they'd never listen to the lyrics. And I was like, how can you love them? Yeah. And that's really when I started to learn more about the language around making music, and the language of melody, and top lines, and lead synths, and drums, and all of that stuff. And I think something for me, because I'm very lyric led, turning a lyric into a hook or a melody has been a real challenge. And I actually,
right.
Maybe the grass is greener, but I actually think it might be more advantageous to have that natural skill of leaning into the hook or a melody than it is about the lyric,
Right. I think we can learn from each other here, because I need some of what you've got. we can do a skill exchange.
Yeah, totally. But that's also why I love like collabing, for example. I really love
same.
The collaboration process of sitting with someone. And it used to be, from what I know, was like that was the old school way of house music as well, that the producer would sit in the room with the DJ and they would kind of share their knowledge about, what technically makes sense, but then also kind of what gets a dance floor going, and that makes sense somehow.
Yeah. I mean, that's been a huge. I'm sure you can relate to this as well when you're testing your own music out. Playing my music in a crowd helps me contextualize the song in a club setting and makes me figure out what's worked. Like the track I made with Fred again a couple of years ago. Like I played it for the first time at Warehouse Project as soon as we made it, and I like went back to him straight away, like texted him that night and was like, "We need to make the intro longer. Like we need to rearrange the structure here because it gets to it far too quickly." And like I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't have played it in a club, and it made all the difference when it came around to it. So I think it really helps being able to be a DJ as well as being as a producer, you know, to have that immediate feedback.
Do you get nervous before gigs?
I was actually just about to say I still get really nervous. Yeah, depending on the gig, I think. I mean, if it's a gig I think that means a lot to me, I will get nervous. I get nervous every time I play at Glastonbury. I get nervous every time I play at like a really important festival or an important moment, or like a boiler room when it's being recorded. Yeah. What about you?
I do, like, if it was being recorded, I do have that sense of I don't know, it adds another sense of this is being observed or whatever. And preserved. But the only way I can navigate that, like I've done a lot during the pandemic, actually I did quite a few kind of horror radio sets. And that was very visual, and the only way I could get around it was to forget about the camera. I mean, my go-to place that gets me through that, whether it's being filmed or at a festival or whatever, is realizing that over the years I've done the work, and also to just enjoy every track I put on. And that kind of gets me out of any dilemma, because if I can stay in that headspace, then, you know, even if nobody else liked it, at least I would have had a good time because I've enjoyed each track I put on. So somehow that has helped, and I think people feel how you're feeling a bit as well.
Yeah, I think what helped me get rid of that like nerve recording thing. I mean, I obviously still get it, but like I got really into radio. I used to have a residency on a radio station a few years ago in London, like, and I used to get so nervous about recording.
Was that on Radio 1?
No, I did that also. I was also nervous about that, but it was like I had like a residency on Radar Radio before it closed down, and it was like before anything sort of like picked off music wise. It was called The Sound Of, and each show would be a specific theme, and it would be like themes outside of music that would make you connect with music. So it was like I did the sound of the heart, the sound of the universe, the sound of color, the sound of I can't remember. And then I'd write a big blog piece about each show, going into detail about like all the different sounds I included, and I like used to include stuff like the vibrations of a banana and the sound of like the sun, and just try and explain like what I've done. But I think having that as a project like really helped me, lose my nerve with everything being recorded and like being perfect.
It's probably getting your hours in as well, isn't it? Like that 10,000 hours or something they say.
Exactly.
Like, I think a wee bit of nerves is good though. Someone told me years ago, you know, like it's not a bad thing because it means you care. I have a history maybe in the past of being quite nervous and very self-critical. So I kind of learned that excitement and nerves kind of come from the same place. Excitement is, you know, having nerves in good faith about yourself, and nervousness is more like having excitement but in a negative way, like expecting a negative outcome. So just to kind of stay positive and say, yeah, I'm excited, you know.
That's some good food for thought. That I've got a therapy session after this, and that's something.
Do you?
I'm like, that's something I want to deep into, because I think I like one thing I'm trying to work. So I've just started working with a new therapist and I was drawn to them because they have their like CV is basically supporting other artists that deal with like not feeling good enough and like self-comparison and all that. And I've been in a bit of a hole with it the last sort of like 5 months. So, and like one thing that we said last week that I'm going to start working on is like what they call like building the internal scaffolding of getting the validation from yourself and knowing that you are good enough, as opposed to seeking it externally. And I think what you just said kind of connects with that, because I have chronic anxiety, And I think that makes me, the nervousness of some situations, like you said, is kind of like me saying that like something will go wrong because bad things have happened to me. And it's like my body's like coping mechanism to be prepared for the worst because of like previous historical experiences and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a really good little nugget. Thank you.
So I want to ask you, you grew up with your mom, single parent, props to your mom. Did you have any queer people around you or any understanding of what queerness or difference was as a kid or as a teenager?
As a teenager, yeah. I befriended a group of kids at school that were the alternative ones, and I thought they were really cool. And turns out half of us were trans, and I feel like there's some sort of like we all merged together when we were younger, and now most of us are out. But most of the time, yeah, my own references were the very like small things that you get drip fed on TV, like watching Tipping the Velvet. I used to watch that in secret. I had a TV in my room that I used to watch in secret. And then like, when the Tattoo song came out, I was like, understood that. But yeah, growing up in Doncaster, there wasn't many, there certainly weren't any trans people. So like I've gone through a whole, obviously, journey in terms of like thinking that I was a certain gender. Like the term lesbian used to get thrown at me quite a lot at school. I was bullied a lot at school, and for being gay. And but that term never ever resonated with me, and it only really solidified with me. And like a few years ago, I was like, I'm not a woman. I am trans, and like I've never felt connected to a lesbian or dyke community ever, and I think a lot of that is because I was bullied so much at school that I had a negative association with it, but also like because I'm just not a woman. So yeah, I think a lot of my like early experiences in queerness when I was younger was like, well, there weren't really many spaces in Doncaster anyway, and the spaces that did exist, I didn't really feel like I was a part of. So obviously I went to school in Doncaster, and then I went to college in Scunthorpe, which weirdly enough, horrible town, but like actually had a really, really good college, and I wanted a decent education. So I used to travel. I used to get 3 buses. I used to have to leave at like 5:30, 6 in the morning every day to go to Scunthorpe to get a better education because they just weren't going to give it me in Doncaster. And that's when I think I started to like feel a bit more comfortable. I was like out at college, and I got a partner and started seeing someone at college. And I think like that's when I started to feel a bit more myself. So I think it was like, yeah, being like 16 onwards is when it started to feel a bit less like stifling for me.
I'm so glad you found that.
Yeah, same. I'm still friends with a lot of the people that I went to college with there, which is nice as well.
It's so important as a queer kid, as a trans kid, anywhere in the LGBTQI plus bracket, that we have positive representation and reasons to find joy within our difference.
Yeah.
Because until you find that, it's fucking lonely. It's really fucking lonely. Massively. and quite scary. And not only if you're not having a positive message, but if you're having a negative message, like if all you're seeing on the TV is like, the one I always think about, like when I was growing up, was for in Silence of the Lambs, like the most feared murderer was trans, or like these horrible representations of like what it is to be trans, and this idea. It's the same like with gay people in the 80s and 90s of being a threat to normalcy or children or decency or all of these horrible, inaccurate and very damaging fucking tropes that are kind of pushed in media. I'm really glad you found some community there.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it wasn't really until I moved to London where I really felt like I found that properly. I would say the majority of my close friends now are trans and all queer.
Yeah,
I have like 1 or 2 cishet friends, but like just not that many, which I'm so grateful for. So I'm like, I've done, it's so important to find your community, isn't it? And like, it's really helped me understand my own identity and that sort of thing. But that didn't really properly happen until I moved to London, which kind of makes sense because that's when I came out. There's like, I think it's really important if you're on a journey to have people around you that can sort of like support and affirm that and just understand it. before I came out as trans, like having a lot of cis friends, and then when I came out as trans, still having all those cis friends. Whilst obviously a lot of them are wonderful and mean well, I don't need the questions. I don't need the just Google it, rather than like me being the the token one to answer, to do all of that work. Like, so it's helpful to have community of people who just understand it, and you don't have to go through all of that, like trying to explain. Yes, I'm on testosterone, but no, I don't want to be a man. I can't be bothered to explain that to someone.
yeah. It's like being the science project at school for an afternoon or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I can relate to that a little bit. Not so much now, but certainly when I was growing up, with people asking a lot of questions about, like, you know, what happens in the bedroom between
always
two men,
that,
and
always that,
all
yeah.
that, all of that one, and on some level, there were times, you know, in my teenage need to assimilate, and also just when I was assimilating, where there were times where I would answer those questions and feel like, oh, this is us bonding, and then there were other times where it was just like, oh fuck, I don't want like me coming out of the house to be an automatic political stance. It's like, I just want to come out of the house and go to the hang out with my mates. It's like, it's a funny thing, like this assumption that if you're visibly out in the world, then you do kind of have to answer those questions or something, and it's a bit of an assumption, really.
Yeah. I can speak to that as an artist as well. Like, I use my platform a lot to talk about my own transition, because it's important for me to speak to people publicly about it. And there's been a lot of incredible like support from people. A lot of people come up to me at shows and say that I've helped them. Cis people who say they didn't really know much about transness before, that I've helped them with that. And then like people who are on their own journey and said I've helped them like understand their own like identity and stuff. So I'm very happy to use it. But what sometimes it means is people think that it's okay to just ask me like quite personal questions, or questions that, you know, there's a boundary. I think I have to like try and figure out like the right balance and the boundary between like, yes, I'm a public person, I'm talking very publicly about certain things, but there are also certain things that I'm not going to answer this on a DM.
Yeah.
Like, I'm choosing when to speak about my transness, and like what about my transition I am choosing to speak about. There's a lot of it I don't talk about. So it doesn't mean to invite like quite invasive questions. I think people are still trying to figure that out. And there's a balance, isn't there, between like how much do I want to give of myself, because it is me. It's not just like me as an artist. It's like my actual person.
We still didn't choose a second record. Is there a record or an artist? We're really going into it, Jordan. Is there a record or an artist that reminds you of that time when you started to find joy in your otherness and find your community and find that positive self-realization?
So yeah, like when I got into playing guitar and I was into guitar music, Placebo were my favorite bands. And Brian Molko probably influenced me more than what I realized at the time. Like a very, openly bi artist and a gender fluid in the way that he presents himself,
Beautiful.
Yeah, so hot. Around the era of Every You, Every Me anyway, he was obviously very much presenting way more feminine, and I think he had a track out on one of his earlier albums called Nancy Boy, and like there's a whole just a gender fluidity to his earlier stuff and as Placebo with the earlier stuff that they had. So I very much connected with that band, and with Brian Molko in particular, just again pulling my my inner 15-year-old self, just actually a bit of a gender bender myself. So yeah.
Brian Molko hasn't been mentioned so far on the podcast, and in terms of image and stuff, there's a Bowie to him, there's like a Mark Bolan, there's this kind of, as you say, like gender bender thing, but also this slightly I wouldn't say macabre, but there's this kind of sardonic thing to the way that they were looking at the world as well, which was I think it's a very queer outlook on the world. Like it's a very Noel Coward thing, or like Neil Tennant has it a little bit as well. This kind of viewpoint of it's almost like a sarcasm, but it's more like seeing the not so pretty reality of things as well. That Brian Molko's very good at that.
Yeah, I agreed.
There's something about that he does this kind of delivery in his I don't know if you'll agree with this, but on your new album, there's a track called Real Hot and Naughty, and you do this kind of vocal thing where it's kind of like a run of lyrics, and Brian Molko did that as well. Like it's almost like a stream of consciousness thing when on the lyrics, and I don't know if you see the parallel there, but I can kind of see it.
No, but again, that's your skill as a lyrics person.
Yes,
I love that observation though. I'm gonna listen back to Real Hot. I mean, there's a cheekiness in Real Hot that Brian Molko displayed, you know, like that's why. I love that track with Felix, because I mean Felix is a person, as an entity, he just exudes cute, fun cheekiness anyway. So it was just like really great to accentuate that in the track. But I do feel that there's a playfulness to it, and I think the playfulness always massively connects with like queerness, you know, and it connects with working classness as well.
So you're finding your community in Scunthorpe, which is a great name of a place, isn't it? Scunthorpe.
It's got cunt in it. The only place with cunt in it.
Well, who's not to love it then? But, you know, so you find your community, you're listening to Placebo. Are you going out much? Are you finding, because, you know, you work now in dance music, what were your early rave and clubbing days like?
Mainly when I was in Doncaster, the scenes I used to go to were a lot more like indie, rock and indie. But then there was a venue that I used to go to in Doncaster called the Priory. And the Priory for one night had Groove Rider. He was my first.
Oh wow!
He was my first ever like electronic music artist that I saw, and I was like, there was 5 people in the room. Like it wasn't.
Are you serious?
Yeah, there was not that many people, and I think I remember seeing him afterwards and getting a picture. And then that was when I was getting really into drum and bass, and then my partner at the time, she turned like 18 before I did, so I like borrowed her ID, and we got a train down to London, and we went to drum and bass arena party, which was at Scala. So I was like 17, and I saw John B, Doc Scott, and Goldie. So those were the 3 of like very early people that I saw. 17. I don't even know how long ago that was. It's 2007.
Wow.
And then when I went to uni in Hull, not too far away from Scunny, and then like that's when I started like really getting into raves, and there was a party there called Shinobi that I used to go to every month, that I ended up like then becoming friends with the guy that ran it, and like started playing there myself once I'd like started DJing a bit more. But yeah, the very embryonic early rave days were all drum and bass basically.
I went to Metalheads at the Leisure Lounge where Goldie used to DJ, and the thing was I loved the atmosphere in those clubs. Sometimes it didn't feel that welcoming for the queer thing, because it didn't feel like there was much queer representation in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was why, that as well. I think that a lot of my early youth was like trying to position myself in like spaces that I do feel safe in, and like actually what I used to feel more comfortable in those earlier days was music that I used to love. So like a lot of the queer LGBTQ parties that happened in the small towns just used to play pop music, and like I've never really been into pop. So I was like, I'd rather just be in a space where I can just zone out and just be in the music. And at that point as well, like, I used to present extremely differently. I think it'd be slightly different now if I was like quite visibly trans and going into a space like that. But I mean, I think that's probably also why like seeing an artist like John B was important. I don't really know how John B identifies, but you know, he used to have pink hair and be very like long pink hair and be very flamboyant. So it wasn't like that representation wasn't exactly there. It was just the alternative for me when I was living in Doncaster and Hull was like, you know, the LGBT parties weren't for me either. I didn't necessarily feel comfortable in them. So I think a lot of like my identity was very much squashed down in favor of the music. And then it wasn't until I started like going out in London where I was like, oh, you can have queer parties that play good music. So that was like quite important for me.
God, we're so strong, aren't we? I mean, when I hear that, you know, I can think of examples where I would have done the same, where like I put myself on the back burner because I have to be vigilant anyway, so I may as well go somewhere where I like the music. But the fucking strength required in that, when I hear you talk about it, and just like that kind of like sublimation of yourself and the vigilance that's required, and you know, it's just so much work a lot of the time, isn't it? But it's such strength.
No, I never thought about it in a strength way before, but yeah, massively does. Like, I think, so one of my earlier records, For You, Like a lot of that record is about like me coming to terms with my queerness, and like I wrote like a message in it like to my former self, and like I did the photo shoot for that record in a toilet. And the reason why it was in the Dalston Superstore toilets, and the reason why is because like a lot of my earlier years being queer, if I wanted to get with anybody, I couldn't do it in a public space. I had to go into a toilet. And it was like the toilets for me, whilst interestingly now have become an unsafe place, actually used to be a place of refuge for me in a heteronormative world, or in a queer, heteronormative club world where you couldn't just hook up on the dance floor. But yeah, now the whole conversation of toilets has completely gone on its arse.
It's just mad the way these things can become so politicized and so angled in a certain way to
massively,
appeal to like people's base instincts in the most unintelligent way. You know what I was just thinking of? I have a friend, I won't name them because I don't know how comfortable they'd be with that, but before I was friends with them, they were a DJ in the late 90s in London, and I would often hear them DJing, and at the time they were presenting and identifying as a lesbian, and an incredibly talented person, and their career was going places, and then they just retired from DJing, and it was a big shock for people. And I remember like for years, and probably still now, there's like rumors of certain parts of their record collection being up for sale, and people like rummaging and scavenging trying to get bits of their record collection. But actually what's happened in the last few years is I've reconnected to that person by chance, and we're quite good buddies, and they're a trans man, and they often like would come and visit me sometimes, or like if I'm playing, they'll come to certain parties and stuff. And what they told me was their career started to take off, and they started doing like press around their career back in those days, and they just weren't comfortable with it because they were being styled up with certain feminine looks, and they hadn't even really addressed their transness at the time, and that kind of put a bit of a stop to their career in a way, because I guess they started to realize in those moments that they just weren't comfortable with being presented in certain ways, but they didn't have the language or the knowledge or the support at all around that stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because like actually when I first started off as an artist and my pronouns and my identity was publicly presentably different, and I was getting misgendered in publications, and that's what made me be like, actually, like I'm non-binary, like I use they them pronouns, and like it wasn't until I saw a mirror up against myself in the form of press that I was like, I started to question that, because I was like, I'm reading all these interviews about me, and it feels like it's not actually me that I'm reading about. It feels really confusing. It was like spinning me out. And I was like, oh, it's because I am trans. So I think like having like, being the industry with the press and having a mirror up against me really moved along my journey as a trans person. Because it just, didn't feel comfortable at all.
I mean, I get that. I think there's probably a level of that when anybody goes public with themselves to some degree, because they suddenly see it reflected back at them, but it must be so much more.
Oh, massively, yeah.
So give me a track, Jordan, from those early music loves of going out to drum and bass clubs and making out with people in toilets.
So London, I used to be obsessed with Hospital Records, and my first ever record that I bought I learned to DJ on vinyl, and the first record I bought to mix with was The Great Drum and Bass Swindle by London Electricity, and again the hook, that melodical hook in there, I still love.
So that's from when you started to play.
Yeah.
Is there a track before that, like from when you were going out and raving?
Oh, so that one, actually, I answered that. Oh, maybe not in the context of going out raving. It was like that was my mum bought me one of like a trance CD, like a rip-off trance CD, and I think it was like the Euphoria collection, and it was like a gold CD, and I used to listen to that, and that was what helped. Like that track was like really formative in me, like connecting with electronic music and thinking like electronic music, I think, is like the one for me.
I love that track, actually. Thank you for, there's a few things I want to thank you for, but that's one of them. And it kind of has like a wee bit of a reference to Enjoy the Silence from Depeche Mode.
Yeah. I think that's it. I heard this track before I heard the Depeche Mode track, and I was like, oh my god, it sampled that, and obviously it's called The Silence, so that makes sense.
Yes.
But yeah, again, another thing with that track is the melody. I just love the melody in it.
Hello, listener. At this point in our conversation, we took a break, during which we spoke about Eris Drew and Octo Octa. So what follows next should make more sense to you knowing that. I get a wee bit emotional talking about them because I just find them so remarkable and kind and so fucking talented. Like, you know what it's like when you're playing most weekends, and then if you get a weekend off, you never really want to go out. And when they were playing the last time in Berlin, I went out and I was so energized afterwards. And I always learn something. Like, they have a lot of, well, they just do it their own way, you know, and they have a lot of reverence. And like, when you see the booth set up, it looks like almost like an altar. The reverence they have for it. And not that everyone should do it like that, but just that they found their way to do it. It's such a beautiful thing to witness.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I did the same as you. I've seen Eris play quite a few times, like on my weekend off, because I'm just like, I know this will be very special. And like the first time I ever met her, it was like the first club night I went to, like after lockdown, so it felt even more special that like she was there cultivating that space. Yeah, it was fucking great.
They're so good. And then something that always makes me really comfortable at a gig is when the Flinta folk get topless, and I just always think that's a great sign of feeling safe. And I've always had this thing, and it sounds a wee bit pious, but I kind of very reluctant to take my shirt off in a club where like the Flinta community don't don't feel safe enough to do that, because I always feel a bit like I don't know, it doesn't feel unless it's like a single sex space, which I do play in sometimes. But when I've been around Eris and Maya playing, that happens a lot, and I always feel, oh, it's great. And as soon as they started playing, actually, Eris just took her shirt off, and then Maya took her shirt off, and then I took my shirt off, and then it was just like everyone. It was just like this great collaboration of like taking your shirt off, and just it made me so happy.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, actually, the first time, now you mentioned the top off thing, before I had top surgery, I used to tape, and the first time I ever did that was with Eris and Maya. They put on their T for T party at Fold in London, and I took my top off like last year, and that was I never do that because of like my own connection. I mean, I'm gonna now I've got pecs, but I wouldn't have done that before. But Eris and Maya just, like you say, they just create an environment where you feel comfortable enough to be able to do that.
You feel very safe.
Yeah, exactly. And
how was the top surgery? Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good. I mean, I wasn't aware of it happening, but afterwards, I mean, I had a really good recovery. Actually, I think I recovered really well. I had no complications. I've got like a really small amount of residual swelling, but now I'm back at the gym and I'm building muscle again. Like, I'm just checking out my pecs every day, really.
Yeah, nice.
This is great.
When did you do it?
January. So yeah, January the 8th. I had like 2.
Oh fuck, that's really recent.
Yeah. I had 2 and a bit months off DJing. I only went back to work, to DJing, beginning of March. So it's only been a month and a half of like back at it.
Wow. And you were able to do it in London? Yeah,
thankfully one of like the more like the surgeon that like fits my body type and is good with like that my size chest and stuff was just down the road in West London. So
brilliant.
And me and my partner share a car, so it actually just worked out really, really well. We just drove to the surgery when they picked me up, drove me back home, looked after me here, and then like I mentioned earlier, Jam came over for a couple of days and kept me sweet company. It's very, very nice.
God, you're well looked after that one. Yeah, it was great talking to Jam about their top surgery as well. Like I find Jam so inspiring for so many reasons, but also, you know, like they're so excited about life right now. And I just feel like, you know, age is age, whatever, but it is great as well to have people to look up to and see them thriving,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
more than they ever have in the future. And it's like, God, that's so inspiring. We need more of that in our queer community. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same. Jam is absolutely one of my best friends, and like if we don't speak for like 2 days, we both message each other and we're like we can feel like lacking.
Yeah.
And we've been really like we had that single out last year together, and like a lot of that single that we did was like anchored us at certain points in our own transition, and like it both means a lot to both of us, and like my transition and Jam's transition are very much fed into each other. We're like quite intertwined in that way, which is just really special, you know, having someone who's on a similar journey. We both come from really similar backgrounds. And we have a lot in common in terms of like our approach to things and just everything. So they've been a real, they're just great, aren't they? They've been a good force.
They're great. And they come from I mean, talking to them about their family as well, it's just like, God, they had such a great support system there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking about this before in the podcast and it got a bit esoteric and waffly, so I'll try and rein it in. But I think maybe because we get to, or maybe because we have to define our own journeys, maybe because we don't hit some of those markers that are kind of so heavy with societal ideas, maybe we get to make it up a bit as we go along, and maybe we get to just, you know, shine in our energy regardless of the age. Because I tell you what, the people that I look up to and aspire to are very often the queer people who are getting older and just defying what's expected of them.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think amongst queer people is very much that. Like I know people who, I mean, we all do, don't we? People that are parents 5 years younger than me, but like look and act so much older, and it just kind of shows that like, you know, the concept of aging and like what it means to be older is a societal thing in itself, and like you do with age whatever feels right to you.
On a slight side note, a lot of the people I'm looking up to in terms of growing older actually are trans and non-binary people, because I feel like as much as that has always been there, it is somewhat less explored socially. Whereas like when I look at gay men culture, for example, I've had to find my way through that. I have that classic story of coming out, going to a gay club, getting involved in a gay scene and being a bit like, oh, don't really fit here because I'm not muscly and I'm not this and I'm not that. And I think maybe because of the history of gay male culture, it's almost like if you're not a Pornhub category, you don't exist. And I want to have a sex life, but I don't want that to be the definition of who I am as I get older either. And I noticed that a lot of the people who I'm having conversations with like this are like feeling very inspired with, who are really having a lot of queer excellence as life progresses, or tend to be kind of the trans and non-binary crew.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it connects to, we as trans people, we as queer people get to have several, in a way, like different, I don't want to say rebirth, but like I'm going through puberty right now. I've been on testosterone for just over a year. I'm a teenage boy in many respects right now, like biologically,
fun,
but also yeah, exactly. Like I'm like this is, and I look younger than I would say I looked when I was like, you know, a bit more like cis passing, or I looked more heteronormative, and people always shocked when, I mean, the cishet people always get shocked when they hear my age, and I'm like, no, it's just because you don't understand queer and trans people, because like we all look,
we're magic.
It's so much more. Yeah, our age is not defined by, you know, like you said, these various different life milestones. It's defined by milestones in terms of our own identity and what we're going through at the time, I think.
100%. Like I have friends in my recovery meetings, you know, who, like I read this statistic that the majority of trans male to female transitions, or you know, later female transitions, are actually happening like in the 40s and 50s sometimes. Yeah, like people are kind of realizing quite late, and I'm around a lot of people who might be in their 40s who are transitioning, and the conversations we have are very much like this, that, you know, they are actually, okay, a teenager, because this is like, you know, the things that they're having to address and the things that have been put on the back burner. And it'll keep you young, that.
Honestly, and also, yeah, M to F, like, in terms of, like, being a teenager, you literally growing boobs, you get boob growing pains, and all of these things that you experience as a teenager. There's, like, fluctuations in hormones. I mean, thankfully, this time round for me, it's not as bad as it was when I was an actual teenager, because I think I'm a bit more mature now, so I understand how to manage my emotions. But there are various different, I've got, like, pimples on my back and various different things that happen to you when you're a teenage boy is becoming a thing.
Has it been all right on the tee?
It's been great. It's been, yeah, I am having the time of my life, basically.
I'm glad. I'm so glad.
I was saying to my friend the other day, who was also started tea around the same time as me, we were both just saying, we were both for quite some time, for years and years, I put it off. And I was like, I don't know if I want the effects. Like, I've got, my dad's side of the family is all bald. And I was like, I don't want to get bald. But I was using that as a barrier to stop. Well, the actual thing was confronting myself and just doing it. And now I've started it and I'm getting all these changes. Like, it's really weird looking back on old photos of myself, because this is what I've always thought I've looked like. And I look back on old photos and I look way more feminine and I've got more feminine features. But I never ever used to feel like that. So it's like a really weird, it's like kind of like a bit spooky. I'm like looking back at former me, even 8 months ago. And I'm like, that doesn't feel like me. So I feel like tea is just making me become more and more myself, which is just very nice.
I mean, it just makes me think, like, it's amazing what we'll put up with if we think there's not enough options, or if we think, you know, if society's made us afraid, or, you know, it's stepping into a massive unknown, like embracing your transition. So it's like,
100%.
I mean, that's none of my business to be proud of you, but I'm so proud of you. I mean, that takes a lot of guts, and I suppose it takes guts, but then what's the option? It's like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, there's an element of guts to it, because I think, like, it is. I have found it personally harder to come out as trans, and also, like, than come out as queer. And I think that, like, people are confused by. I'm having conversations with people who don't quite understand it, and most of the time people are fine with it. But I think there's, like, an element of, like, people are very stuck in their binary ways, and, like, cishet people in particular, they see that I've got a deeper voice and they see that I've got chin hair, and they think that they're like, okay, so should I be using he him for you now? And I'm like, no, like, I still very much feel non-binary, but I express my gender in a masculine way, and trying to just, like, explain that to people, I think it can be quite difficult sometimes, because it's not as easy. It's not black and white. It's all my gender's very expansive and hard to talk about. Yeah, so there's that element to it, and, like, to family members as well. Like, I wasn't out to my auntie and my grandma. Sadly, I haven't spoken to my mum for quite a while now, but yeah, I wasn't out to that side of my family, and I just came out to them 2 months ago, maybe even a bit less. Like, it's still really recent, and they've been absolutely incredible. They don't know how to use they them pronouns. They use he him now, but I'm just like, well, I'll just take it at this stage. It's better than she her. So, and my grandma's got dementia, so it's not great at the minute. But so she kind of forgets. But she was showing, when I was around at her house, she was showing me old photos of me, being like, and that's so and so. I'm like,
oh really?
that's me, but as a different. Yeah, like, I don't think she quite understood that. Like, yeah, because obviously dementia is dementia. I was like, yeah. I know who that is, Grandma.
I know, but, you know, just it's funny with dementia. My mum had dementia, and we had some funny moments, a wee bit like that as well. Like, where my mum would be like sometimes it'd be really lucid, and then other times she'd be like when I came out to my mum, it was a shit show. Like, I left home,
right? Yeah,
and it took us some years to get it back on track, and we did get it back on track. I think there were some conversations that needed to be had that weren't.
Right. Yeah,
and, you know, it's shoulda, woulda, coulda, but it's funny, because once she went to me, like, she was kind of telling me who I was, and then she was like, how's your wife? And I just thought, you know what, like, we're not doing that twice. And I was like, she's fine.
Yeah,
she's just fine. Like, you know, I was not getting into it for the second time, because I thought, fuck, that was rough enough the first time.
Yeah, that's absolutely where I'm at with my grandma at the minute. I only found out it had been slowly declining for quite a while, but she's just been receiving a bit more care recently. So I've been trying to, I was basically avoiding seeing her because of all the changes on T, and I was really nervous about it. But now I have like a wider family around me to sort of support and help my grandma with it. It's totally fine. And now I'm just like, all I want to do is just spend as much time with her as possible. And if she gets the name wrong, if she uses the wrong pronouns, at this stage I don't even care. Like, it's just about, like you said, making those moments as special as they can be with them.
I wanted to ask you, like, you know, how you manage staying, let's say, well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a wee bit reluctant to use the word sane. I've been using sane, but I could question what sane is. But I mean, how do you stay well, you know, in this intersection of being an artist in the world, and then also, you know, being a non-binary person in the world? It's not a given.
So yeah, I'll do the artist bit first, and then I'll do the trans stuff secondly, I guess. So as you know, I've started seeing a therapist to help me manage exactly this. Like, I developed a really good sort of pattern with work last year, where I would work at the weekends. I'd do a few gigs over the weekend, and then I'd have like Monday, Tuesday off, and I'd try and just like switch off. And then, you know, deadlines happened, and then I had top surgery. And then when I had top surgery, I had 6 weeks of no social media, no management, no work stuff. But then from that 6 weeks, I jumped straight into album campaign, which was a really, in hindsight, don't do that. Don't get major surgery and then do the most important project of your entire life, because that was, I'm still heightened anxiety from that. But because I didn't have any gigs, I basically, I was a lot of my connection to my fan base, or just like the, you know, community in it at large, was like via social media, because I wasn't playing out and I wasn't getting that direct feedback. And then I noticed, so this does answer your question, it's convoluted. Like, I noticed that, like, whenever I posted about trans stuff or something that was happening in my transition that I was really proud of, I'd see this like huge dip in followers. And because I wasn't gigging as frequently, the recovery of those lost followers was slower. And that sent me into like a really huge negative mental health spiral, where I was comparing myself. I was like obsessing over socials. I was trying to like massively overcompensate. I was always trying to be online. I was overworking because of the album campaign. And I was in a really bad headspace up until maybe even a month ago. It was quite recent. And I was just like saying to my team, I was like, this social media stuff is like making me want to quit music. Like, I can't keep on doing this. It's not sustainable. It's breaking me. Because all I saw was like, you know, me being myself and me celebrating myself, and people not accepting that, and more people unfollowing me because of it. And it felt to me like this immediate feedback of like, well, I shouldn't even be an artist then. So that was like the extreme of where it went mental health wise as an artist. And like, I've picked myself up since then. I'm like trying to figure out like, okay, what happened in that breakdown? Basically, like what is it? And like, I'm uncovering this with my therapy now. It's like around, you know, seeking external validation and like trying to get that via social media, and also like, you know, the negative self-comparison and how unhealthy that is. And then since I've started to sort of like take a bit more time away from social media and take actual time off, I had my first full Friday off on literally this Friday just gone, like 3 days ago, where I purposely didn't look at my phone for a couple of hours, and I went bird watching, which I'm really into. I love bird watching.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get back into that again, just like back into healthy habits and taking at least one day off a week, where I'm not. And one day off to me isn't just like, you know, a day off gigging or a day off replying to emails. It's a day off actually like thinking about social media, because social media has become a job for us, you know. So I'm getting there. So in that, very long-winded question to you, but I'm basically still on that journey. I used to be very good at like work-life balance and separating the two, but I'm getting better. But I think a lot of it is trying to like not seeking external validation from social media. And others generally, trying to like build it within myself a bit more, and bird watching.
Yeah, I mean, I think bird watching is definitely one to add to my list. I think I would enjoy that quite a lot. Do you have some music, an album, an artist that you lean on when you need a hug?
Yeah, so Kalela's album last year that came out, Raven, It's my like go-to non-dance music album I listen to. I feel like it was my favorite album of last year, and I love going back to it. Where I feel like it takes you on a proper journey, and there's elements of it where you feel like you're getting a hug, but there's elements of it where you feel like you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. But I think that it comes back. It comes back to the hug element, and I think it's because Kalela's just got such an incredible voice. I always feel like I'm getting a hug when I listen to her voice. And I think what stood out to me about that album last year is that there's a unifying thread, a melody. Would you believe it? As I've spoken about many times, that connects the whole album. There's like a real. I've never heard an album that like creates such a unity, a unified sound in that way, and that to me is comforting. Like I've been thinking a lot recently around music and the comfort element of like songs that you already know, and people are like, why is everyone like remaking pop to just like to resample all music? And like the concept of resampling is because like familiarity is a comfort for people, and people want an element of familiarity within music, which is why, you know, certain structures work well and all that sort of stuff. A long convoluted way of saying like the familiarity in that album to me is something that I like going back to for that reason.
There is something in that album that is so warm, and you know, one of the reasons I love doing this, there's a few reasons why I love having these chats, but just, you know, learning how other people are managing and surviving and thriving at times, and sometimes just surviving. These are the conversations I always wanted to have at after parties, you know?
I have thought about the conversation that we're having right now, but I can imagine this is a smoking area with you.
Do you know what I mean? But it's not everybody's up for these conversations. It could be a bit of like okay, let's not do that now. But, you know, there was something when I listened to that album and I thought about you listening to that album, there was something in it where I thought, if that's your album at the moment that you go to, there is a knowledge in you that reminds you to be kind to yourself. Like it's in there somewhere. Because, you know, I mentioned before, like I deal with or manage depression. And one of the greatest things I learned was, although I was very attracted to very sad music, if I was depressed, it felt very natural to go and listen to a particular Cure album, or, you know, certain albums that felt very reassuring to me. But it wasn't a good idea. I had to go and find something that was warm and kind and loving. And that album has it. Because there's a reassurance in that album. There's confusion, but there's also strength. And there's this reassurance of kind of finding your phoenix or something.
I can hear that for sure.
I love thinking that, you know, because I thought the idea of someone out there facing the struggles that come up with being trans, non-binary, and remembering to be kind to themselves in the process, I thought, I fucking love that.
Yeah. Oh God, I didn't even answer the question about being trans. What do I do to look after myself with that? I go to a mostly trans space or trans club night, hang out with my trans friends. I think, again, it kind of links back to you're not on your own. You're doing this with other people. Like I go to places that make me feel affirmed and where I can express myself and feel really positive about that. And I think I also I look to a lot of my friends who just like, I've got a really close friend, Heather. She and I have this like thing where we say how much we both love validation, and we both love giving that to each other, and we both love receiving it. So, you know, if I'm ever in need of like something to do, like support with my transness or whatever, or like any sort of friendship generally, like Heather's often my go-to. So if I want to get bigged up, I'll send Heather a topless photo of myself, and she's just bigs me up.
The best.
Yeah. So yeah, I think having like leaning on other people and just like leaning on other people, but in a way of like a mutuality way is probably what's been helping me throughout my transition.
God, those people are so important, aren't they? Like those people who remind you to be kind to yourself as well. And I have a friend that I've known since I was like 15 or 16. She was the first person I came out to, actually, and we're still friends. And, you know, when we're not being nice to each other, we will often say to each other, hey, like, stop it, be nice to my friend. And like it's a nice reminder to kind of treat yourself well. And we really need those people. We're lucky to have them.
100%. Me and Heather do a similar sort of thing. We've got like a a new thing on Instagram where, you know, you can start collections of people now. If you send someone something and you can save it, and it's just like a bank of like, you know, infographics, which are kind of like, yeah, be kind to yourself. Like, don't talk to yourself in the same way that you talk to others and all that sort of stuff. And so we've called it like the reminders. So if we want to go and remind ourselves, we can go onto our little collection with each other.
I like it. Big up Heather. Say hello to Heather for me. I like her.
I will. She'll absolutely love hearing from you, I'm sure.
Oh, really? Is there a track that you're really into at the moment, aside from the great music on your new album? But is there something that you're into when you're playing out these days that we can put on our playlist?
Yeah, so it's a unknown to the unknown artist called DJ Big Spin. And the track is called Untitled. That EP is just full of like lovely, luscious, early, like kind of like a nostalgic sound, but also quite current. And the Untitled track I played second to last on my Essential mix, which comes out on the day of when this track comes out. And it's just going back to the whole hug. It feels like a nice warm hug to me. It just, as I've said throughout this, I'm really drawn to melodies, and that melody just like hooked me as soon as I heard it. I listened to the promo on repeat about 10 times, and I was like, I need to include this in the Essential mix. So I think that's another track that if I'm trying to calm myself or I'm trying to like soothe in any sort of way, I've been listening to that quite a lot recently.
It made sense to me when I listened to it, because I thought, like, you said second to last. I was like, this is an end of the night track.
Yeah.
You know, because there's that euphoric thing that I hear in your music. I could relate it to that. But then there's also this, I don't know, there's something about that when something's very uplifting like that. It's almost like a redemption or something. It's like, you know, at the end of a night, it's one of those tracks that kind of like brings everything together and lets you know you've landed safely or something.
That's it, landed safely. That's exactly the vibe. Yeah, I'm glad that you got that vibe from it as well. I absolutely felt like that.
But what do I want to tell you? I want to tell you that this was a real pleasure, and I could talk to you about music for a long time. I mean, we got into a lot of stuff today. It's quite mad considering we never met. It was like we really covered a lot of depth, and we have these like nice crossovers with people as well. So you're definitely part of the fam.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I felt the same to you. I felt like you've been again one of those people that I've been like, we need to meet. And now I know talking with you today is just completely solidified that I know in person we'll have a good time together.
You've been listening to Queerly Beloved with me, Cormac. Since you've listened right to the end, I wanted to give you a heads up that for each series of Queerly Beloved, I want to start highlighting the work of a queer charity or organisation worth supporting. For Season 2, I've chosen notaphase.org, a charity committed to supporting and uplifting the lives of trans adults through community and joy. You can find a link to Not a Phase at the link in the episode description, as well as playlists for all the music mentioned in today's episode and every episode. While you're there, please do hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my conversations with more talented people. A big thanks to Michael Lane, my producer, to my manager, Melissa Taylor at Tailored Communication, and of course to Amazon Music for their support, and to you, the listener. Until next time, take care of yourself. All the best. Bye.